Hey folks, different kind of video for this little Scanlines filler episode. It's a look at a piece of hardware. It's a bit of hardware that you can use on your C64 and will give you a slightly improved game playing experience. This is the GenAssister developed by Backbit. This unit is not quite a final production unit, which was sent to me by its creator Evie. I really appreciate being sent this. That, as always being said, opinions here are my own. I haven't submitted this to a review or anything prior to it going public. It's essentially my experiences with the device, playing it with the actual C64. So what the GenAssister is, let me pull it out of its little baggie. It's a small interface which you can plug into your Commodore 64 and will let you plug up Sega Mega Drive or Genesis controllers. Now, you might say they have an 9-pin connector, you can connect them up to your C64, but you can't do that without problems. Essentially, plugging a Mega Drive controller up essentially causes strain on the I/O lines, so you can blow the CIA chips and also potentially blow the SID. So you really don't want to connect them without a filtering interface. The GenAssister does do this. That's the first thing it does. It filters these inputs so you can use them successfully. But it also, as you can see, connects to both joystick ports on your C64. And this gives it some really cool features. Essentially, when you plug it in, the first thing you notice, you've got a turbo switch, which you can see down here. Plugging that in, flipping it up lets you use the main fire button on your C64, like having a rapid fire switch, which is pretty handy. It also gives you a bunch of really neat features. And so what I'll do is I will pull out the trusty original Mega Drive controller here, and we'll sort of walk through it as best I can, right? So essentially, because it plugs into both controllers at once, what you can do is toggle which is active. Use the start button for that. By default, it's meant to be, it treats port 2 as active. I found with this unit, and it may be a pre-production bug, it was port 1 which was active. But that's a quick fix. You just hit it and swap it. Now what that means is the directional pad and the B button will act as that joystick. So if you've got it set for port 2, that's moving port 2 and pressing the fire button on port 2. Works pretty well. The A button now is mapped to the fire button of the opposing port. So if you've got it set for port 2, that is the port 1 fire button. And if you know how the C64 is set up, port 1's fire button is also mapped to space. And we'll talk about this as we show some games off later. The C button is mapped to the second fire button for your C64 GS joystick. So in effect, you don't need one of the trusty cheater annihilators, the joystick which got bundled with the C64 GS. You know, you had your primary fire and your secondary fire. Yeah, and there are a lot of games back in the day that were released on cartridge which supported that because they were designed to be associated with the C64 GS hardware. But also there are a few newer games which support it as well. So that's pretty much basically it. I mean, if we look at the device physically, it's a 3D printed shell. It's available in, this is red, there's also a black version available. And it's worth noting that being this is a pre-production run, there's one feature this doesn't have that the actual version you can order does. And that's a second switch which changes how the C button functions. You can change it so that instead of just being the C64 GS secondary fire, you can use it to up. It maps to up. So then you can play platformers like your Mayhems or your GenAssisters by using C to jump, which is a pretty nice improvement. So it's a very nice 3D printed shell. There's one little design detail I love, and it's these little feet on the bottom. Basically, when you plug it into your C64, it keeps it level, and so you're not putting extra strain on the joystick ports, which I think is a good thing in this day and age. You know, we want to preserve our original hardware as best we can. You've got pretty much everything out. One thing I did notice is with official controllers, the fit was a little tight. It wasn't as bad using the receiver for 8-bit DOS M30. This is one of my 2.4 gigahertz controllers. The receiver for this fit pretty nicely, but both the an original 3-button Mega Drive pad as well as one of Retrobit's 6-button recreation pads that came out last year. Both of those felt really tight to get in. I don't know if that's things will expand a bit over time, but that's something to take note. It's pretty much a very self-explanatory device. Plug it into your C64. The way it lines up is it'll go straight into both port 1 and port 2. Plug a Mega Drive controller on the other end. Fire your C64, and you're ready to go. So I think that's really the basics of it. What I'm going to do now is cut to just playing. I played a bunch of games. I recorded some footage playing them with the GenAssister in use, and I'll just talk about what my experiences were playing with them. Then we'll come back and have a quick little roundup. The first of the games we're looking at is the conversion of 1942. Unsurprisingly, as an arcade shooter, this one is really about using the spacebar to engage in the loop in order to save you when things get tough. Now, this is a thing that works really well with the GenAssister using the A button in order to pull this off. It works really well, and it really does save your hide when things do go wrong. It really improves this version of the game, even though it's not one of the better conversions we've seen on the C64. The next game I'm looking at is Imagine's conversion of Slapfight. Now this is yet another shmup, and yet again, having the spacebar is important here as it's responsible for activating your Gradius style power-ups. In fact, playing it with the GenAssister, I got much further than I normally do, and really it's down to the fact that these controls are far more convenient than having to reach over and hit space on the keyboard. It's a game that's pretty solid and greatly improved as a result. Next up, another classic in Commando. The spacebar here is used to toss grenades, and having that mapped to the A button on the GenAssister works wonders. It's far more convenient. And honestly, it let me get quite a bit further, which I haven't done with Commando in a very long time. I also took a look at Commando Arcade, the enhanced reworking which greatly improves the original game. Like the original game, you can configure it so that space does fire your grenades, and thus now works with the GenAssister, and it works just as well there as it does on the original game. It's far more fluid than using the enhanced mode where you hold fire button to launch grenades. It's a little more responsive, and I think that's far more important in my eyes. Now for one where things didn't quite work as well. It's Kung Fu Master, and this is famous for using the spacebar to toggle your attacks between punches and kicks. And sadly, it doesn't work here at all. I found hitting A simply used my attacks, whatever I was currently using. Whilst it's not the best conversion to the C64, it's a game that I feel would have really worked with the GenAssister, and I'm a little disappointed that it doesn't. To counteract that, we're looking at Riser. Now, Riser is similar in that you use the spacebar to jump, and thankfully it does work here. Being able to jump from the joypad is paramount in terms of being able to improve the playability of this one. I've never been a big fan of the conversion, but it's that bit more playable now by playing with the GenAssister. It works really well, and though I still prefer other versions of the game, it does mean it is that bit more playable. And now onto the first of the games from the C64 GS, and it's Chase HQ 2 Special Criminal Investigation. Here, using the C button, or the secondary fire on the GS joystick, it allows you to use your boosts, and it's actually pretty darn convenient. Though of course, honestly, it's a little fiddly to hit up on the gamepad whilst trying to steer, so it's swings and roundabouts. I think I still prefer it over the GS joystick, and certainly prefer it over the original way the game works. So on to Battle Command. With the C64 GS controls, you can toggle between driving the tank and interacting with the various systems and weapons by pressing the secondary fire. So on the GenAssister, that's now mapped to the C button, and it works just as well here. Battle Command is one of those slower-paced games because of the 3D visuals, and so you can easily toggle and comfortably switch between environments as you need it. It's much nicer than reaching over to use the keyboard on the C64 itself, which Battle Command, of course, fully supports interacting with. And the last game we're looking at here is Steel Ranger. Here, using the spacebar is a way to quickly scroll through your weapons, rather than having to interact using other keys on the system. So being able to just hit the A button and scroll through them without needing to reach over to the computer is really a point of convenience. It really does help make the game that bit more frantic and a bit more enjoyable. So there you have it. That's just a few C64 games being played with the GenAssister in use. If there are any ones you're interested in, please do let me know in the comments. I'm happy to give a quick try and let you know what the experience was like with that. There's a lot of different experience you can get, and quite frankly, I'm not going to be able to pick. I picked a bunch on random thought and just had to play. Like I said, the device is very solid to hold, even though it's a 3D printed case. It doesn't have the roughness a lot of 3D printed products do. feels really good, and it's quite striking as well. All up, it will cost you, at the base price was $40 US. At the moment, the site says 35. I don't know if that's a temporary discount or what more. It's a pretty good price for that. I think if you're playing C64 games on your own a lot, you don't really have friends over, so you don't really need to have 2 joysticks connected. I think it's actually a really cool deal. Being able to switch joystick without having to unplug and replug is really cool. If you're someone who does prefer a gamepad over a classic joystick, I'll admit I'm still a big fan of using my zip sticks. That would be something that's a real big benefit to you. I'm actually really impressed with it. I was a little skeptical coming in, and I'll admit I'm probably not going to have it connected all the time. But I'll definitely bring it out from time to time and use it. I think it's a really cool little device, even with the couple of little quirks. And even though it doesn't quite work on some games, I think there are others where it's going to work really well. And so I think that it's worth checking out. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all very much for watching. Scanlines Filled are a little different from the regular episodes, and I hope you enjoy them, and especially during this controversial time we live in, or these interesting times. As always, if you really enjoyed the video, please leave some comments and a thumbs up. It helps the video do its part through the mysterious, nefarious algorithms. Also, please do tell your friends if you enjoyed it. It really helps getting exposure. It's really hard to do it on your own, especially as a part-time producer. It would mean a great deal to me. But most importantly, thank you all very much for taking the time out to watch this.